Why not use films for spreading the message of emotional education? And using that cinema for emotional education is a potent medicine that we have underused. This can be done at the community level, this can be done at school level, this can be done at collegiate level or university level. And very importantly, if you use cinema and you are sending messages, especially to the young minds, as to how to look at a screen.
You've talked about some of these films that are for maybe adults. How can we use the same thing for a younger audience whose prefrontal cortex may not have been completely, of course, developed?
The prefrontal neocortex believes in interconnectedness. All of us are endowed with 3 sets of emotion. The most primitive set of emotion comes from our limbic system, and these are based on the fight, flight, freeze, and these what we call as completely automatic emotions. Cinema is something which is visual. Before the written word comes into our life, even before the spoken word comes into our life, visual images come to our life the moment life is born. And what cinema teaches me is this.
This is moving from a certain amount of egocentrism towards cooperation, but really towards collaboration. Should we really be thinking about incorporating cinema within existing school curricula?
Why not? Parallel curriculum of emotional education through cinema. We are working on a model. The model goes like this.
How could we use it? How could we improve psychiatric education?
I'll give you 2 examples. One,
the directors' lives, the directors' minds, are they operating at a level where we can learn a lot from them as well?
for almost 20-25 years, I was very closely associated with a director duo, Sumitra Bhave and Sunil Rege, who made a lot of films with mental health content. So I was a part of their team as a creative consultant. What is very important is that all these people had...
Who is Dr. Anand Nadkarni? A psychiatrist, a poet, an accomplished author, a researcher for ancient wisdom, a social worker, an orator, a YouTuber or a social influencer, a corporate coach, a social entrepreneur, a graphic artist, or... It's fascinating to know about his journey of 35 years plus in the field of mental health and psychological well-being. He has changed lives for thousands of people by helping them lead a healthier life by promoting psychological well-being. Not only in case of disorder, but also for those wishing to improve productivity by emotional well-being. The range of his intellectual study is wide. He has applied the humane and emotional behavioral lens to historical and philosophical contributions from great personalities ranging from Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj to Gautam Buddha. His talks focus on applying the emotive and behavioral principles around karma propagated by ancient Vedanta philosophy and Bhagavad Gita to the modern age psychology theories such as REBT. Mental health is for all. His vision is to bring that to everyone. And he is very well bringing it to life through the Institute of Psychological Health, IPH, and their allied organizations. We're privileged to have Dr. Nadkarni here with us today to delve into the world of cinema and how it links to emotional health and psychological well-being. A big shout out to Dr. Shilpa Gaikawari, who is the founder of Sama Emotional Health and Well-being, which is a Sydney-based not-for-profit organization working with a mission of mental fitness for everyone. The aim is to reach out to the community to raise awareness around emotional health and well-being. So without further ado, let's get started with Dr. Anand Nadkarni. Welcome.
Namaskar.
Namaskar. So with today's theme on cinema and its links to emotional health and psychological well-being, I think the most intriguing question is, how did you discover it?
First of all, thanks a lot, Sanil, for inviting me on this wonderful platform that you have created. When I started thinking about mental health on a wider platform, we thought about this IPH, Institute for Psychological Health. And we decided that we should work on the disorder segment, distress segment, and development segment. And in fact, when we focused on development, even before we started the formal institute, we started working with teenagers and young people. And we started a Tough Teens Club way back in 1988-89. And when we started interacting with these kids, at that time the teenage problems, they were not as emergent as they are today. So we started having our meetings, we started taking them to nature. And then it struck me that it's very important if I use media, the theater, the films, to work with this group. And at that time also, even though the social media was not there, the screen was not there, television had just arrived, the concerns of the parents were same.
Right, yeah.
That, our children are taking a look at this, they are seeing this, viewing this, and all that, and how will this media spoil? The same fear was there at that time also.
Yeah.
So then we thought that if we can educate these young minds about films, cinema, one, by adding that appreciation component into it, and taking entertainment to a level of edutainment, and also making them aware of how cinema is produced, how theater production comes to life, right? So with that, we started taking summer workshops for these kids on film appreciation, and introducing them to different personalities, including technical experts from the film world. And what I found was very astonishing, that these people could change in 2 weeks their entire perspective of looking towards audiovisual media. Not only that, but the kids that went through these influences, they continue to meet me even today at film festivals when a particular film is screened. So they have carried that perspective, which actually told me that, look, there is something into this. So with teenagers, as we started working in the early 90s, then we formed, in 1990, we formed IPH. And all this continued my work with the kids, and linking cinema with personality development. It was at that time cinema and personality development.
Right.
Now, the second part was, then I said that if films are making such an impact on minds, why they are making such an impact?
Right.
Let me find out. So then I found out that before the written word comes into our life, even before the spoken word comes into our life, visual images come to our life the moment life is born. And therefore, cinema is something which is visual. And what happens is that during the developmental stage, education, everything is very cognitive. And in that cognitive phase, we are made to believe in words, and words. We are not made to believe in images. We are not trained to see the texture of colors. We are not trained in terms of our perceptual sensitivity. And yet, films continue to make an impact on us. So then, why not use films for spreading the message of emotional education? So from the personality development of kids, which continued, but then this dimension was added to it, that why not use films for emotional education?
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. So before we go into sort of the details, are you a film buff yourself? Do you love film?
So, very much so.
Right.
And right from my childhood, our family was very tuned to films, to theater, and to books, which made a lot of impact on me. Then in my young age as a medical student, I learned dramatics, and I also learned the film appreciation part of it. So I had some inkling into this. And by this time, I also started writing for theater. So theater and films, they in a way go together.
Yes.
In a way. So because theater is a direct experience, all right. But they go hand in hand. So I am still a good film buff.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll like to know, and the audience will like to know what are the films that have made the largest impact. Well, we'll come to that. We'll come to that later. So I think jumping a bit into the actual theoretical basis of using commercial cinema as a tool for educational, emotional education, as you mentioned, within therapeutic or educational settings. So what do you think is the theory behind this? You mentioned a bit, but could you delve a bit deeper?
All of us are endowed with three sets of emotions. The most primitive set of emotion comes from our limbic system, and these are based on the fight, flight, freeze kind of a triad.
Yeah.
And these what we call as completely automatic emotion, like anger, depression, fear, guilt, and also unabashed happiness. So these are the reactive kind of emotions which come from the lower brain.
Yeah.
Then, during the course of evolution, as cognition evolved, our thinking brain emerged, and we started getting more evolved emotion. Those were focused on not reaction but response. They were focused more on interdependence and cooperation, more evolved emotions. And that's why we call them productive emotions, right? And because of productive emotions, society and culture developed because the value was interdependence, right?
Yeah.
And then we all know that there is also prefrontal neocortex, from where progressive emotions come, higher emotions like empathy, compassion, process involvement, humility, gratitude, bliss, right? Acceptance, and all those higher kind of emotions, right? Forgiveness.
Yeah.
So these are neocortical emotions.
Yeah.
Now, all of us have all three sets of emotions.
Yeah.
Right? And therefore, what emotional education means is, how do I regulate my primitive emotions? How do I foster my cortical or productive emotions? And how do I use the progressive emotions for my development as a human being? Because the prefrontal neocortex believes in interconnectedness. The cortical emotions, they focus on interdependence. But we all know that without interconnectedness, interdependence can be transient. If interconnectedness is added to interdependence, then we go from cooperation to collaboration.
Yeah.
Right? Now, this is a theory, right? But suppose I take, say, film shots, or I take film clippings from commercial cinema. If I take short films and I work those clips according to emotions shown, or according to the transition of emotions in the characters, right? That sometimes you will see a character becoming too much self-centric and going to the limbic system.
Yes.
Sometimes you will see that the character comes up out of that limbic system and start working rationally. And sometimes you will also see a character that would transcend to a level of empathy.
Yeah.
Now, when I show this, theory becomes live. So then I started looking at all the movies that I see from this angle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then why commercial cinema? Because commercial cinema is known to people. In my country, India, it's the Hollywood that binds my entire nation. There are two things that bind our nation, says Professor Ramchandra Guha, who is a social historian. He says Bollywood and cricket.
Yeah.
These two things, they bind India.
Yeah.
You go across, you will see that. I'll give you just an example. I have a show called Stress Management and Bollywood.
Right.
So I do it for 2.5 hours.
Okay.
And I show them film clips from commercial cinema. First, I show all the limbic system emotions.
Right.
I show scenes of anxiety, scenes of anger. Then I show how people start managing their own emotions. And then I show how people go from selfish to selfless through the film clips.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
very interestingly, I have done this program in my country, from North Indian states like Punjab to the southmost states like Tamil Nadu.
Yes.
And everywhere it has worked.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it strikes that chord.
Yes. Yeah.
You know? So we had this wonderful Hindi movie called Three Idiots.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that Three Idiots movie, there is a lot that we can talk about in terms of mental health, emotional health. You know, for example, there are a couple of characters there. There is a professor who is called Virus, Viru Sahasrabudhe. So he is very aggressive, self-centered, dominating. There is a student edition called Chatur, who is also like that. Then you have a Raju Rastogi, who is a very submissive guy, very, very submissive. And you have that Farhan, who is a very passive guy. So see, aggressive, submissive, passive, and you have Rancho, who is really, really assertive. So Rancho always sees to it that his interests are served and others' interests are also served. And he uses his creativity and problem solving abilities for just that. And that is how, in a way, he mentors his two other friends. And that's why the movie starts that they start finding him out. They are lost touch with him.
That's right.
Many years have passed and they start looking for it. Taking some of the snippets from this kind of a movie, if you show, aggressive, assertive, submissive, passive as the self-belief system of a person, then immediately people start resonating.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what is desirable to be that Rancho is desirable.
Yeah.
And because he is empathic, and at the same time, he has the right combination of emotion and solution. Now, this was a great blockbuster in our country, in India. But to derive mental health messages was something which was very important. Similarly, there is a film called Chak De India. Right? It's based on hockey. So I use this film and the snippets from this film for team building, again for aggressive, assertive, right? And how a leader or a coach has to also use different strategies if this person has to build up cohesion of individuals, which means to get them from limbic system to the cortex, right? And finally, in that movie, Chak De India, there are two girls who are very self-centered, and finally they have a final, India and Australia. And at that point, they give you a very selfless behavior. They are very selfish till that point. So it's a turn. That turn is created to create that climax. But from emotional point of view, it shows development of the characters from your primitive emotions to productive emotions to progressive emotions. So I use that film. There's another film called Lagan.
Yes, I love
It's on cricket. And as you know, India, everybody loves cricket. So using that cricket for team building, that how the protagonist uses even the deficiencies of people to make that team out of rustic villagers who face in cricket the ruling elite English people. And what is very, very interesting and very important is that for the English people, it's only a game of cricket. It's a challenge which is a sports challenge. But for the Indian people, that challenge has a heavy burden.
That's right.
Right? Because Lagan means tax. So if they are going to lose that match, then the taxation is going to change. So for them, it's a near biological threat. Right? So again, the difference between a psychosocial challenge and a biological threat. And how it changes your perceptions. Right? So in a way, the design of the movie is very intricate. If you look at it from emotional point of view, that on one side the movie talks about cricket match. But for one side, it is an existential threat. Right? So these aspects of that movie, and therefore in this movie, the last over of this match is very dramatic, extremely dramatic. And then I use that to demonstrate what are the three types of tensions that we all undergo. And I call them nil tension, that is no tension,
Yeah.
cool tension, and full tension.
Right. Yeah.
So nil tension, cool tension, full tension, and how the protagonist, who is played by Amir Khan, so how he goes through all these three phases. It's a decider ball. He has to have a 6. It's the last ball, right? It's 6 or finished, right? He goes to full tension.
Yeah.
Now, as the bowler approaches, right, he has two images. One of his mother talking to him about his father. Second image is of her girlfriend who gives him a support.
Yeah.
With these two images, he brings himself to cool tension from full tension and focuses only on factors which are within his control, right? And hits that 6, right? There are still in that shot a lot of emotional ups and downs. But when you show people and talk the concept,
Yes, that's right.
then it makes a lot of impact. It's almost like reading a book.
That's fascinating. I think they were absolutely great examples. So I guess just to recap for the audience as well. So in terms of the emotions, the way you think about it is the primitive automatic emotions, and then moving towards the productive emotions, and then moving towards progressive emotions, which is really the prefrontal cortex. And really as human beings as well, as you say, is that this is moving from, well, a certain amount of egocentrism towards cooperation, but really towards collaboration, which
Absolutely.
for all of us is important.
And as we know, the limbic system, you have all the centripetal forces acting on you.
Yeah.
As you go towards the prefrontal neocortex, you go from centripetal to centrifugal. And very interestingly, one more experiment that I did on cinema. Indian cinema has a fantastic vantage point, and that is songs. There's no other movie market or movie industry where songs are an intricate part of the movie industry.
Absolutely.
And in India, there are songs, all situations.
Yes.
Impossible situations. You won't believe that people will sing in these situations. But in India, you have songs and the audience enjoys that song.
Yes.
Right? So in songs, what happens? You have an image. So you have element of cinema and element of music is added to it.
Yeah.
And see, sound, melody.
Yeah.
When these two come together, it's a wonderful medium for emotional education.
Yeah.
So I have a show, 2-hour show that I run, and that is called as Filmi Nagme. Nagme means songs.
Yeah.
So filmy songs and your EQ. And I have taken parts and parts from the popular songs.
Yeah.
What happens is, people start tapping also.
Yes. Yeah.
And then in between there is discussion. I talk about the emotions and the audience talks about emotions.
Yeah.
And there is a fantastic interaction.
Yeah.
Right? And then I give a quiz to the audience on these songs. So, which is the other song that like these emotions that you remember?
Yeah.
Then people come out with that.
Yeah.
So then I have got this kind of a cine quiz. That is songs and emotions.
Right.
Because in India, as there is a Bollywood, there are regional languages and music in regional languages.
Yes.
And also movies in regional languages. So what I do is that I get these kind of snippets, or sometimes I use a quiz. I give them, for example, I make groups of people. And I say, okay, we take the emotion of love. So one group thinks about songs on romantic love. One group thinks about songs of God's love. Somebody, third group talks about the songs which are on love for the country. Fourth group, love for our children, nurturance. Everybody comes out with songs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then what happens is we are working on emotional awareness and emotional acceptance.
Yes, that's right.
Otherwise, our emotional vocabulary is sadly limited.
Yeah.
We either feel bad, sad, mad, or glad.
Yeah.
And that's about it. Whereas if you take out a dictionary of any language,
Yes.
you will see more than 15, 1600 words denoting shades of
That's right.
emotions, right?
Yes.
So this way I started developing things to reach out to people. Since your audience is going to be international,
Yeah.
I'll also give example of a movie like Titanic,
Yes. Yeah.
which I again use to find out in our rational emotive behavior therapy. There is an activating event and there are consequences.
Yeah.
And in between is the belief system of that person. And this belief system is dependent on what is the self-talk of that person.
Yeah.
So I always take the protagonist of Titanic, the young man, the young lad, and how, as the movie progresses, how his self-talk guides him. He is very realistic, number one.
Yeah.
He focuses on factors which are within control and factors which are beyond control. He is very much focused on the goal.
Yeah.
First, he wants to win the love of the girl,
Yeah.
and then actually he wants to protect her also.
Yeah.
Right? So his goal orientation, his reality orientation, his discrimination between factors within control and beyond control, stage-wise how it goes through the movie. And the movie becomes a fantastic learning experience.
Yeah.
Right? Even at the end, no, he thinks realistically that which part of Titanic is going to go down the last. So he tells her that you have to go to that part. He cannot make it sadly, but she can make it. Right? And all throughout, you also see the canvas of emotions on the Titanic. For everybody, the activating event is the same.
Yes.
But their emotional consequences are very, very different as per their belief systems. So you will see those musicians on the deck who continue to play the music till their last. You see that old couple who choose death in the embrace. And you see the villain, so-called, his sole goal is to get even with this guy,
Yeah.
right? You see a canvas,
Yeah.
and you can give a message of mental health that events by themselves do not cause consequences. It's how you look at things. Now, if you relate it to Titanic,
Yeah.
becomes easier. And what are you doing? You are giving them principles of rational emotive behavior therapy in a very playful, and that's what I call as edutainment.
Right. No, that's brilliant examples. Absolutely. Yeah, very nicely explained, and I think it resonates as well. And as you speak as well with these images. So even though we're obviously talking in words, the images are there. When you talked about songs of love, for example, the Hindi songs come to mind specifically, or for the country. I can think of for each one. It's amazing how those aspects come to mind. So when you're thinking about edutainment and thinking about the choice of films for appropriate films for emotional educational purposes in terms of ages and the targets, how do you go ahead and choose those suitable films?
What happens now? That when you start seeing a film, you start looking at it from your point of view.
Yeah.
So that then it becomes a habit, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens when this habit percolates to your team? Your team also starts looking at it in the same way. For example, we have a show on effective parenting, and because otherwise we people are called for giving talks on effective parenting. Talks and PowerPoints after a point become very redundant. But then if you take the movie clips from the regional movies, from international movies, and then you show those clips with examples of good and bad parenting, then it becomes absolutely impactful. In our country, there was this movie called Dangal. where there are two sisters who go on to become wrestlers, and their father is their coach.
Yeah.
And there is always this tussle in the father's mind, whether he is a coach or he is a father.
Yeah.
Now, this is a wonderful plot, right, to talk about parenting.
Yeah.
And he is a very autocratic parent first.
Yes.
Then discovers later on, the fine nuances of parenting.
Yeah.
And how their relationship takes them further. So you start looking at movies from that point of view.
Yeah.
So this was one aspect. The second aspect is that for almost 20-25 years, I was very closely associated with a director duo, Sumitra Bhave and Sunil Sukthankar, who made a lot of films with mental health content. So I was a part of their team as a creative consultant. And working with Sumitra and Sunil actually educated me, to a phenomenal extent, right? And I saw how a film comes through.
Yeah.
How a screenplay is written, how shot division is done, how the final script arrives, how shooting takes place, the complete process and journey of how a film is conceived and how a film is completed, it taught me a lot. And one of the films that Sumitra and Sunil did was on schizophrenia. It was the first ever film in India which was a commissioned film by Schizophrenia Awareness Association. And I was working as a creative consultant for that film, right from developing the screenplay. And this film won in India the Presidential Award, so National Film Award. So being a part of that also tuned me. For example, in this film, Devrai is the name. Devrai means sacred grove. Sacred grove means these are the jungles which are protected by the culture. Around the village, there is this sacred grove, and no villager should touch the tree in that sacred grove. So what happens? It's a shining example of biodiversity. And the metaphor was that as you have biodiversity and acceptance in nature, why shouldn't we use the same way to look at our thoughts? And why should we label somebody based on thoughts? Why shouldn't we go beyond? And as in that sacred groove, many, many thoughts stay together. And nature has its own way of discrimination. And when a person suffers from psychosis or schizophrenia, he loses that discrimination. And to get him back to that discrimination, as it is important to have clinical treatment, it's also important to have a wonderful emotional acceptance, a support, also going back to an environment which is less threatening and challenging, where the person will become truly reflective. All this journey is shown in that movie. And also role of a caregiver, which is so important in the recovery of schizophrenia. That it's not only the patient, but the caregiver who is extremely important. During the course of this shooting of this movie, we coined new words for patients of schizophrenia or people suffering from schizophrenia. We used a Sanskrit or Devanagari scripted word called Shubharthi. Shubha means good. Arthi means one who desires, one who wants. So as you have a word called Vidyarthi, means student. So Shubharthi means a person who desires something good to happen. So no more patient, Shubharthi.
Right.
And the caregivers are called Shubhankars. So one who do something that is blessed, that is Shubha, that is pious. Right? So this Shubharthi and Shubhankar, very interestingly, these two words today are used by all support groups of caregivers in our country.
That's brilliant.
From Guwahati to Chennai.
Wow.
From north to south and from east to west. So very interesting, because look how destigmatization happens.
Yeah.
So no more patient and caregiver, but Shubharthi and Shubhankar. And even some support groups in United States have also picked up these words.
Yeah.
So they have crossed the boundaries of nations, right? So this particular movie, we try to be scientifically as correct as possible. Even when we have to portray the content of delusions and hallucinations, how will we do that without, making the audience,
Yes. Yeah.
no, that should not happen. That experience also the audience should be able to understand. So how to do that, not making psychedelics,
Yes.
right? So if in this particular movie, we also saw to it that it has to be clinically relevant.
Yeah.
Even when the medication is started, how much period will go when the behavioral control will come? How much period will go when the congruency of mood will come? How much time will go when actually the delusional system will start becoming a little weak?
Yes, that's true.
So all these things we followed. And that is why this movie also became an audio-visual example for even psychiatry postgraduates.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is something which is important. Very interestingly, in my language, Marathi, my local language, I also wrote a book on this movie. And we made it into a mental health sensitization program. You read the book, see the movie, or see the movie, read the book.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So, when you start even using cinema,
Yeah.
there are so many side products that, come out of that, which makes this journey very, very worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah. And Devrai, I obviously when I first saw it, I had, no understanding that you were involved or a psychiatrist was involved. But I remember thinking when I saw it, that was the best portrayal of schizophrenia that I have ever seen at all, because it really did not just focus on this internal world, or as you said, the hallucinatory aspects, because sometimes there's a fine balance between how much you show it and the individual's got to relate. So the beauty about this was one was able to really get into, connect with the actor.
Yeah.
And it's without doubt, I think one of the best, or if not the best portrayal of schizophrenia that I'd seen. I remember saying that when I'd first seen the movie many, many years ago as a trainee psychiatrist.
True.
Brilliant movie.
Same thing happened with Kasav. This Kasav is on depression. It won the highest national award. And I was also, with the same directors, I was also involved as a creative consultant for that film. And then he lands up with at a remote village on the seashore. But we have indirectly got the psychiatrist in, but he is not a part of screen. And how this person gains his emotional balance, that he is in clinical depression, then he comes to a manageable sadness, then he starts getting, rays of hope, and finally, he gets his composition, his balance back, very sensitively shown. And turtle is again used as a metaphor. And in the Indian culture also, turtle has some significance. So all these are also elaborated in this movie, because Sumitra and Sunil always wanted to make movies culturally relevant also, so that people should relate to the metaphors, right? So that was another experience. Even there is a song in that film which the protagonist sings. So when it is the same tune, but when he is very depressed, his pitch, his tone is different. As he goes on, coming up and recovering from his depression, that changes. So very subtleties about depression, we have tried to, the director Duke has tried to show. It's again a very, very sensitive film. So being related to these films, and generally what used to happen is that when these films are shown to people, wherever possible, I was invited to talk to people.
Yes.
So generally what happens that my film appreciation and my role as a mental health activist, it gets merged together. And one of my senior colleagues from India, Dr. Mohan Agashe, who is a psychiatrist and who is also a very accomplished actor, was also closely related to Sumitra Bhave and Sunil Sukthankar. So they made a film on dementia called Astu. And Dr. Agashe played a wonderful role. That film also won a lot of awards. And me, Agashe sir, and the filmmakers, we used to have film screenings where the film is shown and all four of us are there.
Yeah.
And then we talk to the audience. So that we did across our country. And then me and Agashe sir, we also do programs on film appreciation with short films. Because see what happens, short films is a treasure. And now we get access to so many short films.
Sure.
So I have a bank of short films, and from that bank we select the theme, and me and him for different audiences, we do shows. Very recently, for senior citizens, I did a show on in Marathi. It's called Apul Kiche Pool. In English, it means bonds of empathy. So this was for a senior citizen audience, right? And me and Agashe sir were there, and we show the clip of short film, and then the audience talks and we talk. It's a feast for 2.5 hours. People relish, people learn. So we started working like that. There is a 3.5 minute film called What Is That? It's in a European language. It's between a father and a son. We use that film for caregivers. We use that film for generation gap. So one film can be used in very many ways, right? So this way you start discovering, the things which are there.
So if we come to, you mentioned EQ at some point, emotional quotient. So emotional intelligence. I mean, I guess a lot of this is really how do we enhance that emotional intelligence? In what way do you think commercial cinema enhances, I guess, the emotional intelligence for young adults or children? So you've talked about some of these films that are for maybe adults, but how can we use the same thing for a younger audience whose prefrontal cortex may not have been completely, of course, developed?
I use all the superheroes from the Marvel.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
Well, let me take one example.
Yeah.
Hulk and emotional regulation.
Yeah.
And how Hulk uses his anger and sometimes how anger overpowers Hulk. So you have all these superheroes also. You can pick up scenes and themes from them for kids, right? It's not that one has to use only regional films.
Yes.
All these are there, and children, they identify with all these heroes, the comics characters, Marvel universe, this universe, that universe. One has to only find out which piece I'll take. The panda.
Yes.
So on that panda series, that panda and his teacher, that teacher is very small, Shinfu or something is his name, right? So he's very small. Panda is like that, right? And the teacher, how he tries to teach panda patience, emotional regulation, right? So once you have that, then you have this vast range of animation movies, and you pick up things from them.
Yeah, I was just going to say, they probably give you some ideas to it. It's like that.
See, what is very important to know is that if I can do it and you can do it, then anyone can do it.
Yeah.
How to use cinema? It may be commercial cinema, it could be short films, it could be regional cinema, it can be cinema.
Yeah.
Right? And using that cinema for emotional education is a potent medicine that we have underused, we as mental health professionals.
Yeah.
We have hardly used this. Now, with the amount of screening available with us, I can even to my individual clients send some links.
True.
Tell them to show those links, come back and discuss with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can give at the end of therapy session, we give home assignments to our patients. Why every time give written assignments?
Yeah.
Why not give them audio visual assignments to our clients? Take a look at this movie. Give them guidelines.
Yes.
And let them use those guidelines to listen to songs, to see movies. Your home assignments also gets those kind of dimensions.
Yeah.
So therapeutic use, we talked about bibliography.
Yes.
So in the bibliography, why shouldn't we use cinema? And very importantly, if you use cinema and you are sending messages, especially to the young minds, as to how to look at a screen, aren't you also preventing the screen obsession? Aren't you not making screen use a little more mature and goal-oriented? So much the cinema has to offer to all age groups.
Yeah, that's a very, very, very good point. So, talking about the therapeutic use and school, so I think a big discussion is, of course, about schools and screen time for children. So, if we think at a broader level, so school curricula, for example, so how can or should we really be thinking about incorporating cinema within existing school curricula?
Why not? I mean, that is the idea that has occurred to me, and our team at our institute, we are working on it to get or evolve a parallel curriculum of emotional education through cinema. We are working on a model, and anybody can work on it, right? The model goes like this, that you take a group of teachers who are working with very small kids, say 5 to 10, or even 3 to 7 and 7 to 12 and 13 to 18 and 18 to 25. Suppose there are 4 groups. You can change the groups, but 4 groups. You take teachers who are working with these kids, right? You take some sensitive parents and you take kids themselves. And everybody sits together and brainstorms on, and also some mental health professionals, right, who will coordinate this whole thing. And the mental health professionals will give them a kind of a structure that these are the messages that we want to give, right? And the group comes together and starts making a library database of different audiovisual material for the same.
Right. Yeah.
This can be done in community, right? And you are getting all stakeholders together. A mental health professional, parents, teachers, and kids of that age, right? And make a small parallel curriculum which will run on the weekends, right? And the psychologists and the psychiatrists will give the theory input, right? All these people will get their own experiential input. Everybody will scan through films and short films. Will evolve their curriculum.
Yes.
Isn't it? So that is something which we need to explore. That how can we make a parallel system? So this can be done at a community level, this can be done at school level, this can be done at collegiate level or university level also. And we have been working with some college, we call in India the higher education as a college. In the Western world is called the university education. So we are working with some campuses there in terms of emotional education. And we are actually mentoring these kind of groups at that level to use cinema.
Right.
And give a dimension to the film appreciation. What is the dimension? The dimension of emotional education. And to do that, we at IPH were the first people in 2007 when we thought that we should have our own audiovisual unit.
Right.
And so we started that. It is called as Audiovisual Aids for Health and Nurturance. So the acronym is AWAHAN.
Right.
And AWAHAN IPH is our unit. And we started with zero experience, zero money, zero infrastructure. And from that we started developing our own short films. We started developing our own clips. And we started documenting our own work. And developing all this in 2014, we started our own YouTube channel, which is in the local language, Marathi. It is close to 200,000 subscribers now. And we got into a studio, audio studio, complete post-production unit and all that. And our team learned on the way. Everything from subtitling to editing to adding special effects to graphics, this and that. When we started making our own films, we started getting the themes of mental health in those films. For example, on our channel, Awahan IPH, we have 3 films which are based on caregivers of schizophrenia.
Right.
So when we started making those films, a lot of psychiatrists, lot of psychologists using those films with caregivers.
Right. Yeah.
And also somebody who is not a caregiver sees it. For that person, it's a sensitization. It's a education. It's a psycho-educational part of that.
Yeah.
And our films are very widely seen on the YouTube. They are included in different film festivals. So slowly, we started developing our own way of expressing. On our channel, Awahan IPH, there is a wonderful short film which depicts how our de-stress helpline, telephonic helpline works. The name of our telephonic helpline is Maitra. Maitra means friendship. And there is a trained community coordinator or a communicator who is at the end of the telephone, and anybody can give a distress call. So in India, we do not have a distress system as such. So our telephone number, in a way, functions in isolation. Right? But the identity is not asked. And a lot of people, they keep on calling because we are functioning now for 28 years continuously, even during COVID times. So this is a film made on how the communicator gets the calls and handles the calls.
Right.
And there is one caller at the end whose only voice is seen. And what you see on the screen is only this communicator.
Right.
It's a very nice film, very sensitive film, made of 18-20 minutes by our team,
What's the name?
our team. The name is Maitra.
Maitra. Yeah.
So that is something that we made. All these can be used by people for a lot of training.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And we made a documentary called Faith Beyond Fear, which is also there on our channel. This is on the work of one of our colleague psychiatrists, Dr. Bharat Watwani, who works with homeless mentally ill. And he was given some years back the Magsaysay Award, which is an international recognition to his work. So we made a documentary on him because we thought that the film medium also needs to be used for mental health documentation. If there are colleagues who are working in this field, then why not document those things? Similarly, on the channel, we have a complete playlist on what is called as Dvija Puraskar. We felicitate people recovering from chronic mental health issues and also their caregivers.
Right.
The word Dvija means twice born. So again, it's a Sanskrit word, twice born. So one is your biological birth, and second, when you recover from a mental illness, that is your second birth. And these are case studies that we have documented, which are also there on our Hanai page, our channel. So when we started making all these things, we also added on our channel very important use of again this media. We have a career conference that is held across 10 cities of Maharashtra, where we project relatable role model, people who are taking different choices of careers, who are helping people who are also making their own lives more meaningful. And we have a bank of almost 400 such interviews in regional languages. Now we are trying to work out an e-learning program around this data so that it can be used by people for various different uses. So these are the ways which came up, when you start working with cinema as a medium, one that started for me as only a avid cinema watcher, evolved into something where we are now also making and contributing this stuff.
Yeah, this is brilliant. It really, really highlights the impact and the spread and how far, it can reach. The reach is phenomenal. And yeah, it's amazing the stories that you're sharing. That gets me thinking. You mentioned that cinema as a medium is underused, with regards to emotional well-being, society, the impact that we can make. But it also gets me thinking that are we underusing it in psychiatric education? And whether we can actually use this as a medium to really highlight the phenomenology, the psychopathology. Because your example of Kasa, when his tone changes when he's singing different tones, how could we use it? How could we improve psychiatric education?
I'll give you two examples. One, we all heard of Pinnell, Dr. Pinnell, who broke the chains of the mentally ill people.
Yes.
I found a small little documentary made on him.
Wow.
Which I use for my postgraduate teaching.
Right.
So if you go across, you will get a lot of historical evidence of even people who have worked in mental health field. One way of including it into psychiatric education. The second is, for example, showing clinical features.
Yes. Yeah.
So in this film called Astu, which is on dementia, progressive dementia is shown in the protagonist. Again, Dr. Agashe has acted, a psychiatrist has acted as a person suffering from dementia. Yeah. Wonderful depiction. So, first it is the memory deficit. Then slowly how it starts taking control over the personality facet. Then how new learning stops. So all these phases are actually shown in that movie. And how there are certain things which are a part of your rote memory, recent past, how you go on babbling it. This protagonist is shown as a professor of Sanskrit. He has learned a lot of things and he doesn't lose them. There comes a reference, he would go on chanting the Sanskrit verses. But the cognitive base behind his chanting has now gone.
Yeah.
This is something to which a developing student of psychiatry would resonate, no? And because this is a visual information, if he gets a patient like that, he will be able to relate it immediately.
Yeah, that's a really great example. So I guess you've given us a really, wonderful example of how we can use cinema, across different spectra for emotional and psychological well-being. But coming to you, and I think before we jump into what you like, your favorites or your most impactful, you touched on the Three Idiots film right at the start. So, and you talked about Raju Rastogi, and there is a scene that's very, I guess, poignant, very impactful. So I wanted to analyze that particular sort of scene with you, particularly for the audience to really see, or maybe kind of go into your mind a little bit.
Sure.
So could you take us through this scene and how do you visualize it, and how can this be applied to education?
Sure. This character, Raju Rastogi, as I said, was a submissive character. Particular scene starts and the context is that he has deliberate self-harm. He jumps from the window of the director's office and he's saved. But he has broken his legs and he's on a wheelchair. In the meantime, he has passed with poor marks and there are campus interviews. And he is going to appear for that campus interview. But after that triggering event, this guy has reflected, introspected. And his friend, the chief protagonist, has also helped him to reshape his own worldview. The interviewers asked,
आपके मार्क्स कंसिस्टेंटली पुअर हैं, कोई खास वजह?
डर से.
and he says, fear is not good for grades, sir.
Fear is not good for grades, sir.
And from where did that fear emerge?
बचपन से ब्राइट स्टूडेंट था. माँ बाप को लगा ये हमारी गरीबी मिटाएगा. मैं डरने लगा. यहाँ आया तो देखा रेस लगी हुई है. फर्स्ट नहीं आओगे तो कोई जानेगा भी नहीं.
As the burden kept on increasing, I lost that confidence and I started depending too much on fate.
और अंगूठियाँ पहनने लगा. पूजा करने लगा. पूजा क्या, भगवान से भीख मांगने लगा. ये दे दो, वो दे दो.
So he's talking about he was focusing on factors beyond control rather than focusing on factors within control.
Yeah.
And then he says,
16 हड्डियाँ टूटी. 2 महीने सोचने का मौका मिला, तब बात समझ आई.
he now becomes aware of his emotions, aware of his self-talk.
सर आज मैंने भगवान से नहीं कहा कि मुझे जॉब दिला देना. मैंने सिर्फ हाथ जोड़े और इस लाइफ के लिए थैंक यू बोला.
And then he says,
अगर आप लोग मुझे आज रिजेक्ट भी करते हैं ना सर, तो कोई अफसोस नहीं, क्योंकि मैं अपनी लाइफ के साथ कुछ ना कुछ ढंग का तो कर ही लूंगा सर.
to the interviewers, and the interviewers say,
देखिए, आपका इतना फ्रैंक बिहेवियर हमारी कंपनी के लिए ठीक नहीं है. क्लाइंट्स को हैंडल करने के लिए हमें एक डिप्लोमेटिक आदमी की जरूरत है. आप कुछ ज्यादा ही स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड है.
so he says कि
दोनों टांगे तुड़वा के अपने पैरों पे खड़ा होना सीखा है सर. बड़ी मुश्किल से आया ये एटीट्यूड.
now the irony is, when he is talking about standing on his feet, he is in a wheelchair.
Yes.
But he is talking metaphorically
Yes.
about standing on his feet. Now he is not equating the rejection to his self-worth. And then when he turns around, he says,
आप अपनी नौकरी रख लीजिए, मैं अपना एटीट्यूड रख लेता हूँ. आई एम सॉरी, डोंट माइंड सर.
then that guy says, oh,
रोको. 25 साल से मैं रिक्रूटमेंट कर रहा हूँ. बहुत सारे इंटरव्यूज लिए हैं. जॉब पाने के लिए लोग हमारे हाँ में हाँ मिला ही लेते हैं. तुम कहाँ से आए हो यार?
जी
सैलरी कितना लोगे भैया?
this is a 3.5 minute scene, but it has a lot to talk about, right? It is all stress management, no?
Yeah.
If your clarity of your goal, factors within control, beyond control, you are very realistic. You are not relating one part of your life to the whole of your life. You are saying that my actions and behaviors can be analyzed, but my self-worth is above everything. Right? So many messages come. And if you involve the audience in all this,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were talking about this, I remembered the Lagan scene, because the fact is beyond one's control. The fact is sort of moving towards what he can control. Amir Khan in that last ball. So yeah, wonderful depiction of so many of these factors, self-worth, etc. Thank you so much. So that was wonderful. Absolutely very, very enlightening. So what I'd like to do is we started off the interview right at the start, and you told us, you love films. You've loved it since your childhood, books, and all of those things. So what we'd like to know is what are your, either favorite films or most impactful ones, or ones that essentially are valuable from this emotional and psychological well-being perspective?
The list is endless.
I'm sure.
Because I like directors right from Kurosawa and Satyajit Ray to Hitchcock. So it's a long list as far as international cinema is concerned. Bicycle Thief is one movie that has impressed me a lot, which I use. Chaplin movies, especially Great Dictator. Dead Poets Society is a wonderful film that has captivated me. This is in the international part of Bergman's films, the Swedish director. So Bergman Truffaut's films, the French cinema, my favorite directors across the world, who I would like to see and enjoy what they are saying. Coming back home, there are very good directors in our regional movies like Sumitra Bhave, Sunil Subtankar, and in the newer generation, very many fantastic filmmakers. Also in commercial cinema, people like Rajkumar Hirani, who has Three Idiots, who has Munna Bhai. That Lage Raho Munna Bhai, I use it for empathy. That this Lage Raho Munna Bhai is a take on the medical education and medical systems, right? And now this guy has a lot of empathy and a lot of humor is there.
Yes.
But if you go across that, then there are a lot of serious messages in that Lage Raho Munna Bhai. And also that Bapu Wala Munna Bhai, Gandhiji comes. So all these movies have got a lot of impact on me. And also the musicals, some of the musicals from Hindi cinema, some of the musicals from Marathi cinema, they have been very instrumental in influencing the way I see cinema.
And do you always sort of analyze these things, or do you ever sort of watch a movie with the prefrontal cortex not so analytical?
What happens, that when you start learning things, after a while, it becomes very internalized. And today, fortunately for me, I'm not a film critic.
Right, yeah.
I am a film appreciator. Which means that if there is a emotionally very intense scene which is going on the screen, I resonate with those emotions.
Yes.
And all the technical details, they get merged in my emotional experience. And that is why I'm not a dry analytic person. Because if I become one, then what I have got out of cinema?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
that's a great message.
So I am with all emotions. And what cinema teaches me is this, that do not label any emotion as good or bad. All emotions are integral part of human life. Look at them. And the more you look at them, you will start finding out the shades within even one emotion. And as the experience becomes emotionally more meaningful to you, you will notice that you have added meaning to your life itself. So I am very, very thankful to this medium. It has helped me to be a more human individual.
Oh, that's absolutely a brilliant message, and it almost seems like you've wrapped it up so beautifully towards the end. But I do have a question before we finish. Is you've of course worked with a lot of directors, and when you've now explained, how movies are, you've taken us on a journey. Really, you've seen, the production, you've been on sets, etc. It almost makes me wonder, the directors' lives, the directors' minds, are they operating at a level where I guess we can learn a lot from them as well?
Absolutely. That is why I gave example of Sumitra and Sunil, that although they have not studied psychology from the books, but they have studied it in their own way. And I think that all the creative filmmakers, all the people who are related to films in that way, are actually wonderful exponents of psychology. Shakespeare must not have done a post-graduation in psychology, right? So, nor did Chekhov, although was a medical practitioner. But what is very important is that all these people had intense curiosity in human emotions. So I think that is something which is very important. And we as mental health professionals, have we clinicalized emotions? Is a question that I would like to leave the audience with. That we are in clinical world, people come to us with clinical problems. And when we prescribe antidepressant or mood stabilizer, those kind of unhelpful and harmful moods, they come under control. Yeah. But have we lost the emotional ethos of the experience of our clients? And if we have, then cinema is a remedy.
Yes, absolutely. That's a wonderful message and a great message, I think, for psychiatrists alike, for anyone. And the curiosity, as a psychiatrist, really, the curiosity to learn or to experience the emotions of, I guess, the patient or Shubharthi. The Shubharthi. Yeah, so the Shubharthi. So I guess that's really where cinema, psychiatry, I guess, comes together. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute privilege to speak to you. I've learned, a huge amount. So thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Namaskar.